Hello, welcome to B01, Developing Safe Spaces, including online environments that allow for continuous improvements of animal care and use programs. My name is Sade Chisholm. I'm the conference assistant. Before we get started, I have a few announcements. The online conference platform includes the agenda and session information, links to all live and on-demand presentations, slides, our virtual poster gallery and exhibit hall, and after the meeting, the session recordings. Please note that resources are included at the speaker's discretion. If you experience technical difficulties during the session, review the conference attendee page on the platform for information on ensuring your system is set up properly, or use the chat box. Many sessions will be streamed in Zoom, and so ensure your app is updated. During this session, submit questions by clicking on questions in your Zoom controls, and please use the chat box to comment, share knowledge, and talk with your colleagues. We'd like to thank our conference supporters and exhibitors for their support of this meeting. Please be sure to visit their booth pages in the virtual exhibit hall during this event. Virtual booth pages include information and resources provided by the vendors. And some vendors are offering giveaways and participating in real-time video chat. We especially want to thank our event supporters, ATUN, CAIUS, Huron Consulting Group, iMedris, and InfoEd. And finally, a reminder that registering for this event implies your understanding of and agreement with PRIMR's principles and expectations for conference participation in our copyright policy. Anyone found harassing, badgering, or verbally threatening others during sessions and/or who are found sharing content presented during this meeting without permission will be removed from this meeting and/or prohibited from attending future PRIMR events. More information can be found at primr.org/aboutus/policy. I will now turn the session over to our speakers.
Thank you so much. This is B01, Developing Safe Spaces, including online environments that allow for continuous improvements of our animal care and use programs. I'm Denise Jackson, and I will let each one of the speakers introduce themselves as they get ready to do their part of the presentation. The conference content copyright, this has already been discussed. We can go to the next slide. Jennifer, myself, and William, we have no relevant personal, professional relationships with respect to this educational activity. So let's talk about what we're going to learn today. We're going to talk about identifying the diversity that exists within our own animal care and use programs and why ensuring everyone has a voice that is listened to is important. Explore the challenges of some forms of communication and share possible solutions while maintaining open and safe channels. And finally, share strategies used throughout pandemic to keep lines of communication open, ensuring everyone has a voice and also maintaining morale. So I'm turning it over to our first speaker, which is Jennifer.
Great, thank you, Tanise. And good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you're listening in from. I'm Jennifer Klahn. I'm the Director of Research Safety and Animal Welfare in the Office of Research Policy and Compliance at UCLA. I've worked in IACUC administration for close to 20 years now. I have a bachelor's and master's in psychology, and I'm a certified professional IACUC administrator. I've been part of the PRIMR IACUC Conference Planning Committee for a few years now and serve as faculty for the Interagency Collaborative Animal Research Education Project, or ICARE. I'm going to start our session by talking about the diversity that exists in our animal care and use programs. Several years ago at an IACUC meeting, one of my colleagues noted that he starts all of his talks with a definition. I think this can be a helpful tool to ensure that we're all on the same page as we're learning. So while preparing for this session, I turned to the internet to see how Merriam-Webster defines diversity. According to our friends at America's Most Trusted Dictionary, diversity is the condition of having or being composed of different elements, especially the inclusion of people of different races, cultures, etc. It really does say etc. In a group or organization. A second definition is an instance of being composed of differing elements or qualities. So then I looked at other hits Google provided on the search for definition of diversity, and I came upon a PDF that displayed open-ended responses from a student-conducted survey done in April 2010 and posted online by the UNC Gillings School of Global Public Health. The survey asked the question, how would you define diversity? And displayed 3 pages of responses, which ranged from single word responses like dissimilar to more nuanced explorations of the word. You can visit the source document to read through all of the responses, and the URL is at the bottom of this slide. But I've posted some of those responses that resonated with me here. Diversity is a satisfying mix of ideas, cultures, races, genders, economic statuses, and other characteristics necessary for promoting growth and learning among a group. Diversity is the immersion and comprehensive integration of various cultures, experiences, and people. Heterogeneity brings about opportunities to share, learn, and grow from the journeys of others. Without it, limitations arise and knowledge is gained in the absence of understanding. In these particular quotes, what especially resonates for me is the idea that diversity is necessary for promoting growth and learning, and that without diversity, knowledge, as indicated in that last definition, is gained in the absence of understanding. So now we're going to take a few minutes for an activity, and I hope you can all see the image on the screen here. So take a look at the picture and share what differences you see. You can share this in the chat. I think we have the ability for you to unmute yourself. And you can speak up, but hopefully, again, you can see the images. What kind of differences do you see?
We're getting a few, we see race, age, sex, race, and age. We see gender, emotion, nationalities, facial expressions. They're coming in so fast. Gender, cultural, different backgrounds, head coverings, makeup, facial expressions, images either black or white or color, body type. Oh, that's an interesting one, body type. Mood, emotions, surprised to be happy, hair color. It's about, and their clothing.
Great. Thank you. These are great. Oh.
More markers of socioeconomic status, socioeconomic status, like their teeth.
Great. Those are all really great. Thank you. So the second part of this activity, hopefully this is going to come up, is what kind of differences do you not see? So what's not visible that these different images, and here they come.
Yes, educational levels, mental health, neurodiversity, personality, economic status, religion, education, profession, social roles, family relationships, political affiliation. Oh, wow, that's a really great one right there. Mm-hmm. Beliefs, values, and their struggles. Marital status.
Yeah, these are great. Wow, there's so much that you can't see just by looking at these pictures.
Where they live, where they're from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, yeah. So I really like this exercise because it highlights that diversity exists in ways that are both visible. So for example, gender, race, hair color, and invisible, such as intelligence or ability or religion. And both categories impact how we interact with others and how we communicate with each other. When we're not aware of our differences, we may make assumptions of sameness that are inappropriate or omit critical information. We may not think about those things we can't see, like ability. And this could impact things like accessibility and safety, and harkens back to the quote on that last slide about gaining knowledge in the absence of understanding. So thank you all for participating in that activity. Okay, so bringing this back to IACUC and animal welfare oversight, is there a need for diversity in our programs? Well, the answer is that yes, there is a need, and there's actually a mandate. The PHS policy, for example, requires a diversity of membership for our committees, including a doctor of veterinary medicine who has experience in laboratory animal medicine, a practicing scientist, a non-scientist, and someone who's not affiliated with the program outside of their membership on the IACUC. The USDA supports this need for a diverse collection of voices on our IACUC, mandating the appointment of a chairperson and at least 2 other members. Of the members, at least 1 must be a veterinarian and the other a non-affiliated member. The USDA further emphasizes that in cases where the IACUC consists of more than 3 members, not more than 3 shall be from the same administrative unit of the facility. This again demonstrates the necessity of different perspectives in our program of oversight. And outside of our committees, we have a multitude of voices representing a diverse population that includes researchers, undergrad and graduate students, faculties, PIs, IACUC staff, animal health technicians, vivarium and operation managers, veterinarians, vet techs, EH&S personnel like the biosafety officer, radiation safety officer, chemical hygiene officer, controlled substances administrator, contracts and grants officers, post-approval monitors, our institutional official, and many, many more. Each of these people come from a variety of backgrounds and bring a different set of knowledge, skills, and priorities to their role. It is important that our IACUCs reflect the diversity in our programs in order to ensure the best programs of animal welfare, while at the same time being mindful of the additional impact or the additional burdens placed on underrepresented groups. We need to encourage and support involvement in IACUC activities by people who don't normally have the time or opportunity to participate, as this involvement gives us additional insights and positively impacts collaborations and communications in a way that ultimately benefits animal welfare and science. So I'm going to turn things back over to Tanise.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm Denise Jackson. I am the Director of Animal Welfare and Research Integrity at Florida A&M University. I'm a graduate of Tuskegee University. I'm also a presenting faculty with the iCare group, as well as the CPIA Council Chair. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about the different forms of communication that we actually have. So face-to-face, which we aren't doing very much of right now, video conferencing, emails, texts, group texts, as well as some social media. So when we think about before COVID, what face-to-face meant was you may just wanted to pop into a researcher's office just for a comment or a suggestion about something that may be going on, but you probably wouldn't use this for some quick, urgent, or confidential issue because you never know who you're going to meet or see there. Maybe if we schedule that face-to-face, if we have some serious questions, we have an current urgent issue, or we require some focused attention, and we want them to be on point with us when we have these conversations. What we're doing so much more now is web meetings or video conferencing. And we used to use that just because when people were in different locations, but that's a little bit different now, where you would pick up and call somebody on the phone for a quick message, just wanted to leave some information. You may even want to do that in an email or a text. And I'm not sure if some people have been using social media, but I know we've been using social media now just really to express our feelings that we'll talk a little bit more about. So when we talk about communication strategies, we're looking at our face-to-face and video conferencing. And has this form of communication molded into our main form of communication? It was just used to be used as we reached people when we were traveling, but now it's what we do all the time. You know, is it overload? I know it's definitely overload for me, and I can imagine how it is overload for other people, especially in the animal facility world, because we are the essential workers and we never were able to really take a break from it. But how do we treat people in this virtual space? You know, how did you get angry when somebody's like a few minutes late for a video conference that you've scheduled? Have you made that space safe for them? And now that we've molded these two, is there really any difference between the two now? And have we used this as our need as social human beings to be connected to each other? So when we think about the climate of our country right now, are all the members of your team comfortable with this form of communication? Have you ever been in these meetings with them and then some of them don't have their cameras on? Or maybe there's a person in the group that has a very overbearing personality, and they always monopolize the conversation. So, you know, you may have individuals that just turn the camera off because there's never going to be a way for them to express themselves. So when we talk about text and group text, this is just as much overload as the face-to-face and the video conferencing for me, because we used it a little bit prior to the COVID pandemic, but now it's constant. And instead of me just getting a few texts from a few people, it is everybody at my institution now. And we really need to be sensitive to the needs of individuals at our workplace and kind of understand how they're feeling right now and what's going on, the isolation that they had to engage in and being away from the workplace. You know, for some of us, that may have been a good thing, but for others, it has not been good. The isolation is not good. When we send these group texts and we don't get a response right away, has our anxiety levels increased? And so we're extremely anxious to get somebody to respond to us right away. Do we feel like we're badgering individuals by constantly texting and group texting? And in the midst of all of that, you know, while we're trying to get the work done, have we even thought about checking on the employees' welfare and just ask the question, the simple question of how you're doing? So when we talk about communication strategies, the next slide, how can we be effective? And do we understand that everyone's time is valuable? And we were just kind of having this conversation just before this session started. When you were in the office and in your facilities all day long, were you truly engaged with an individual from the moment they came to work to the minute that they clocked out? You probably wouldn't, but it seems like now that we're in this virtual world, we want to continually stay engaged with everybody. So when we try to make sure that we value everybody's time, we're going to look at some of the barriers that may be placed in front of us. So personal. Well, let me go back. A lot can really be seen on a Zoom call, especially if an individual decides to turn or not turn on their camera. This is just our way of connecting with them. But do we feel that we should always have the camera on? Are there reasons why that individual doesn't have their camera on? It could be that maybe they're embarrassed about their home surroundings, you know, but we do give them the option of using a virtual background, you know, so we kind of really need to look at that virtual world and see where we are now. So, and they may be just going through something personally that day when you've scheduled that meeting, and they just don't feel per se camera ready. So then we look at cultural. Are we being aware, like at the beginning of Ramadan, and then there was Good Friday. So Good Friday was a special day for me, but I had 4 meetings that were scheduled for me that demanded my attention to be there. Are we looking at our perception and how we are perceiving those around us, and how we, like I said, can be overbearing and not be cognizant of people's time when we come to this? Emotional. The current George Floyd trial is going on, which may give people the recent police shooting of Dante White. You know, we need to really think about the people who are in animal facilities and just how these cultural events and life events that are happening around the center of work are affecting them. And what about our language? You know, maybe this this nonverbal and this virtual world is not the normal way that people are forms of communication for some individuals. And when we email or text, you know, are we thinking about how things come across? So we need to really be cognizant and think of our people's welfare. And then at the very end of all of this, when the world can be back to normal, is everyone ready to go back to normal? Does everyone want to go back to their day-to-day work? You know, and I think some institutions are being very sensitive to this issue, and they're making sure that they are providing some options for individuals. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to William.
Tanise, real quick, there was a great comment from Janet in the chat. One unexpected benefit of video conferencing is that the chat channel can provide a way in to the conversation for people who in a face-to-face meeting might otherwise be talked over. And also the meeting host has the option of muting others to enforce people taking turns. So thanks for sharing that, Janet.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But we just want to make sure that they are able to have their voice heard and not just always put into the chat. So we just need to really make this virtual world a great, safe place that everyone feels like they can actually turn their cameras on and actually speak. So thank you for that comment, Janet. So I'm turning it over to William.
Thank you, Tanise and Jennifer, and hello to all of you in the virtual space. I'm certainly delighted that you have joined us. I'm William Hill. I am the Director of Laboratory Animal Resources and the attending veterinarian here at Florida State University. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Laboratory Animal Science from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in Greensboro, North Carolina, and a Doctorate of Veterinary Medicine from North Carolina State University. I completed residency training at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center and held post at both the University of Tennessee, Knoxville and the University of Kansas prior to moving to Tallahassee for my current role. Next slide, Jennifer, please. So I think we can all recognize and agree that the COVID-19 pandemic has substantially altered the ways in which we work and also the ways in which we communicate. And Tanise highlighted many of those. Organizations undoubtedly have faced unique and unheralded challenges in enabling employees to both work productively while simultaneously maintaining employee engagement. I think we can all appreciate that has been very difficult and a challenge to navigate around. Also, the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely been a crisis, both in the workplace and also, I would posit, in our personal lives. But navigating challenges such as COVID-19, especially within an animal care program, requires truthful, accurate, and transparent communication. And so what are some of the benefits of that open, honest communication with all stakeholders in and throughout the program? So here are some publications that kind of highlight the impact and the positive benefits. And so it definitely builds employee trust, and it builds employee relationships, employee engagement. As individuals know what's happening, they feel involved and they feel valued. And there are also pro-organization behaviors that occur during crisis. So groupthink and how to navigate through and beyond the crisis. When folks get the information they need, they can respond appropriately to that. Next slide, Jennifer, please. So I'll talk about some of the lessons that I learned in trying to effectively communicate through the COVID-19 pandemic. So early on, just a couple months or a couple weeks actually into the pandemic in March of last year, I sent a message with expectations to our team in laboratory animal resources. And I concluded the message with, I hope normalcy returns sooner than later, but getting back to normal will require a reduction in new COVID-19 cases. And certainly in March of 2020, I did not foresee it being the same way in March and April of 2021. But I went on to share that a reduction in new cases will require all of us to be vigilant and to reduce disease spread. And then I invited folks to a party at my house. When it's over, I'll host a Corona party at my house, and I appreciate all that you do. And so this message was intended for my team, but I inadvertently sent the message to all of our users throughout the animal program. And so I received numerous messages, not quite, Jennifer, back to the previous slide. Thank you. I received numerous messages. Thank you for the invite. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? I just invited hundreds of people to my house. That was not what I intended to do. So in communication, we have to certainly be clear about our intended audience, who we intend for the message to reach, and make sure it reaches those individuals and not an unattended group. Next slide, Jennifer. Thank you. I also learned during this time that we also have to be cognizant of message delivery to unintended audiences and the implications of those unintended messages. So in April of last year, our Vice President for Research posted a message to the FSU website concerning a research ramp down. So a discontinuation of research activity. This message was picked up by our friends at PETA, and subsequent to that April 2nd message, PETA began a letter writing campaign, not only to Florida State, but there were also other institutions who had posted similar information to their public spaces or public virtual spaces. And so we received a letter from PETA decrying what we were doing at Florida State and euthanizing animals and ending research that involved animals, and then questioning if we could end this research, should this research have been conducted in the first place. But those were messages. Again, the message was posted by our vice president in good faith, but it did not at all involve our animal program. You can see here in the left-hand corner, even prior to the April 2nd message, I sent a message to our users emphasizing that there was no requirement or request to euthanize animals. And that was largely in response to faculty concerns and faculty and rumors that faculty were hearing that there would be a requirement to euthanize animals, and that was not the case here. We were here to provide exemplary animal care just as we do every day throughout the entirety of the pandemic. But those messages did not stop. So again, in June of last year, we received a message for public records. So there was an unintended audience grabbed a message that we were sending, and it just has had continual implications for our animal program in terms of a public record request. Next slide, Jennifer, please. So just to kind of highlight some of the things that we did here at Florida State to facilitate communication during the research and research ramp down and university closure. There were weekly research continuity meetings hosted by our Vice President of Research. We probably had 26 of those meetings. And again, it was transparent communication, bringing all stakeholders to the table so we could hear a concentric message and then have marching orders to share not only with our team, but through with our users. You hopefully saw from 2 slides ago, we used a listserv for targeted messages, not only to our personnel and laboratory animal resources, but also our users. And we use that to dispel myths. We also use that to disseminate frequently asked questions. As we would get questions, we tried to answer those questions and post those questions to the larger listserv so all individuals could benefit from those answers. We use signage to restrict occupancy. So this is written communication, posted written communication. We use signage to restrict occupancy in all of our rooms and also to convey necessary precautions that we all have become familiar with. To attempt to maintain employee engagement, the other veterinarian and myself, we provided weekly lunches for personnel. We were here every day while much of the rest of the university was closed. So we did provide early release. We didn't do a staggered or rotational schedule. We said, come in, get your work done. Once your work is done, leave. We're still paying you for that 8-hour workday. Use that time to study for ALAS certification exams, what have you. And we also, I'm very, very intentional about Tech Week activities. And so we hosted virtual Tech Week activities during the International Tech Week. We have done, and I really, really appreciate this and will continue to use this past the pandemic, our virtual training opportunities and consultations. We have recently transitioned to a protocol management software system. And so there are many questions throughout our user community with the system. And this has provided an opportunity for quick, easy screen sharing consultations to get those questions answered. So certainly should have been using modalities such as Zoom before the pandemic for that kind of assistance, but it just didn't happen. So this has been a good segue into that. Also, during our, we call them tabletop rounds, but our weekly team or staff meeting, we do SWOT analysis. So we look at what went well that week, what did not go so well, what are threats, what are opportunities, and we do that as a weekly exercise amongst the leadership group in laboratory animal resources. Next slide, Jennifer, please. So I'll conclude here. Effective communication, and I'll kind of raise the question, is it necessity? Have we been forced into this by the COVID-19 pandemic, or is it innovation? And so I'll share this quote from this article that I found. When organizations provide substantial information about the crisis, such as COVID-19, and invite employees to identify the information they need and present both positive and negative impacts of the crisis to a company, employees' intrinsic needs are more likely to be satisfied, which in turn fosters their knowledge sharing. Knowledge sharing, especially through personal contact, has been believed to be effective for increasing the change of organizational innovativeness and creativity. So I'll leave you with that, and I believe we will entertain questions now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So far we only have one question in the chat, but it does say, will the panelists specifically speak to the creation, application of safe spaces to circumstances where individuals are involved with a non-compliance event, such that they will be willing to share the info, even though it may be escalated to IACUC attention and have consequences they may want to avoid?
I'm reading the question to kind of internalize it a bit more. Sade?
Mm-hmm. So these are issues probably of non-compliance that an employee may feel they may get reprisals from, or repercussions from presenting that information. I'm thinking that's what we're talking about here, correct?
Mhm. Yeah, maybe somebody who wishes to remain anonymous because they're afraid of being identified as a whistleblower. And yes, that is the answer in the Q&A.
Yeah. So at our institution, we already have a policy in place that when things are presented that are brought back to the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, that they're already anonymous. And so, you know, we already had that particular policy in place. I'm not sure. What about some other institutions? I'm assuming that you all have those.
I'll just kind of piggyback on your comments, Dr. Jackson. Certainly the regulatory framework
Sure.
Provides that safe space, and not only provides it, but mandates that safe space.
Yeah.
And so institutions should be adhering to that regulatory guidance for ensuring both anonymity and non-reprisal or no repercussions for reporting that. One of the things that I have been or have tried to be intentional about doing is encouraging investigators to self-report and not having that responsibility be solely the responsibility of individuals that are involved in or within our laboratory animal resources group. So if we encourage the investigators to report, I think that builds both collegiality and it also builds a culture of compliance as opposed to the imposition of what I would call a police state.
Yeah, and
so I think that answers your question. How do you inspire them to share information about non-compliance? So I think you have conversations with them. You say, we identified this, and I would encourage you to report that. And so again, it builds relationship, it builds trust. And I think that's where what we ultimately want to create and foster within our programs are relationships of trust and confidence that we are here to serve. We are here to assist and facilitate research. And when we shift the kind of responsibility for reporting back on them, I think that helps. So I hope that answers your question.
I'd just like to add that I think it takes a lot of time to build that culture of trust. And especially if the culture at your institution tends towards a little us versus them, maybe adversarial, you'll have a lot of work to do to establish trust, going out into the labs, meeting with people just to say hi and do you need anything and can I help you? And so it will take some time, but it's exactly what William said is, building those relationships is how you bring people in and inspire them to be more open about incidents that they're involved in.
And yes, we've used the post-approval monitoring, kind of use that model as a good liaison with the researchers about, hey, this is what's going on. And so every time that something is found on a post-approval monitoring visit, it's not necessarily molded into a huge non-compliance. And we're working with the PIs to get those things corrected. And it could, just to be social about it. And let's like, hey, let me see how we can fix that.
So and just to, again, piggyback off of Dr. Jackson, she mentioned a post-approval monitoring program. So a very large component of our post-approval monitoring program here at Florida State University involves observation of live animal procedures by the laboratory or by the principal investigator. So we have a program called a vet partner program. And so each laboratory is assigned a veterinary partner, a veterinarian who will work with them to help facilitate their research. And so the vet partner can perform the post-approval observation or the principal investigator can. So again, that is hopefully a very clear way to say, we trust you. We want to walk alongside you to help further your research. And we trust you to observe your research and note any deviations from what's been approved. So again, I think that just speaks to the culture and trying to create and maintain a culture of compliance as opposed to a police state.
That sounds like a great program. There's a comment in the chat from our friend, George Babcock, who has used the self-reporting model for many years and now has about 80% of non-compliances being self-reported by their investigators. That's really impressive.
Very good.
And that's where we want to be. So thanks for that, George.
Mhm.
And there's another question. It says, can the panelists share particular ways communication during the pandemic have changed from the before times, which they think we should carry forward with us to the after times? And I think we've already kind of decide, I think that people have, some of the people at my institution have become less stressed in this mode of working because we have staggered times, I have even found that some things at the university are a little bit more efficient than when people were actually physically there all day long every day. Some things have really worked well. And I think there are some of the things, like I said before, some of the institutions are going to carry forward this staggered work schedule, hybrid work schedule forward with their employees because they have found that they are much more productive. Any comments from the other panelists about that?
So I shared before, one of the things that I have just really appreciated about this time is being able to interface with investigators to provide one-on-one training via the modality of Zoom, specifically related to protocol development. That's been a great asset, and certainly that will continue. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I would just add that our team has I don't want to say mandated because that sounds so heavy-handed, but we all agreed at the beginning of this that we would check in every day in Zoom chat, just a quick, hi, I'm here. And that when we leave for the day or leave for an appointment and be gone for a certain amount of time, that we would do a similar check-in. And I think it's akin to what we did when we were in the office. You let your supervisor know that you're leaving, but it makes it more visible to the entire team who people may not interact with directly, so that they know, okay, this person's no longer accessible. And I think that's been helpful. I know some other teams within our larger program have not had similar communications, and you figure out what works well for your team, and this seems to work for us. As we look towards the future and maybe continue to have some folks working remote part of the time while others maybe are on site, we'll certainly have to consider, how do the ways that we adjusted our communication styles during the pandemic and what were we using before, and how can we blend all that together to be effective while we have this, hybrid situation going forward. So I think it's going to be very interesting in the after times, how we proceed with our communications.
I like the designation of times, like before common era, before times, after times. It's that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I just think being aware, and I think I have actually really taken this time to learn a little bit more about my staff and learn a little bit more about the issues that they have to deal with at home. Mm-hmm. So now I've been able to actually understand a little bit more, about maybe attitudes and personalities and emotions that they may come to work with. Now, with them being at home, I feel like I've gotten a little bit closer to my staff because I think I've learned more about them, because we do have more fun conversations now.
Tanise, that is such an interesting point. For years, we've had a weekly team meeting where, in the before times, it was in person, it was in a conference room, everyone, sat there and said what they were doing, or what meetings they had coming up or projects they were working on during the week. And so we transitioned these to Zoom, and every Monday morning, everybody checks in. And, we spend the first, 10 minutes of the meeting talking about, did you do anything fun over the weekend? And then everybody says, well, what's fun these days? Okay, it's watching TV, and, well, who's watching what? And so, yeah, I feel like I'm learning more about my staff, but I'm almost embarrassed to admit, but I'm going to tell y'all anyways. It took me several months into this whole situation before I actually reached out to individual members of my team and said, let's schedule some one-on-one time. Now I have my direct reports who I've been meeting with all this time, but the other members of the team, let's schedule some one-on-one time just to talk about how you're doing, and do you have the resources you need? I mean, there was always the assumption that they would tell me if they needed anything, but for me to actually, get outside of your own head, Jennifer, and reach out to your team. And I was so grateful to do that because, I learned so much. Just, wow, you meet with someone and you talk and you learn things, go figure. But yeah, I feel like I've learned so much more about the team through this experience. So thanks for making that point.
Mm-hmm. I think that really piggybacks on something that William had said before about interacting with his team. Mm-hmm. What you said, Jennifer, about reaching out, and it's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I love William that you provided lunch.
Are we running out of time?
Nope, we have about 15 minutes, so.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
By all means.
Yeah, Janet made a good point. It feels like the pandemic has let us acknowledge that we're all humans with needs and limits. Go figure. Why didn't we do that before?
Yes, I really feel like the pandemic has really made me realize some crucial things about myself and my own personality and how I interact with individuals in my team. And so I feel like I'm a little bit more calm. I don't know if it's because I'm doing a little bit more yoga classes at home. I have a few more videos that I'm watching for my yoga, but I feel like my interaction, especially with so-called my intense or high maintenance principal investigators that always need something all the time from me, I am so much better at communicating with them now. Mm-hmm. So overall, it's made me calmer.
That's great.
And so, Janet, I would even extend your comment. So certainly there has been an impact of the pandemic, but I think it's also the pandemic coupled with the national reckoning on racial injustice, coupled with the 2020 election and the subsequent disputes and fallout from that have all just kind of for many of us, made us recognize the humanity of the people that we see every day.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments?
There's a comment, very valuable insights shared by each panelist and Janet during the session. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. And Janet did have a follow-up that recognizing that these are hard times to live through is really key. Yeah.
And that we have to navigate them together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I just think being a little bit more in tune with the people that you work with and understanding that we all have different personalities, we all have different cultural things and, how we look at things, our emotional state, and then like William said, everything that happened in our country through the election and everything, that we are all human, we all have difference of opinion, but we do all have the common goal of excellence in animal care. And that's why we're here in this space working together. And I think bringing all that and understanding all that about everybody allows us to come together and be able to do a better job at our current jobs. Mm-hmm. So thank you for those comments.
Tanise, you touched on something in your section about Zoom meetings and how when people are a couple minutes late, how we respond to that. And I think that, whereas in the old times, the before times, we might have given people 10 minutes. And now it's like, oh boy, they're a minute late, how could they be a minute late? All they have to do is sit down at their computer and, sign in. But, recognizing there's so much else going on, and, it's not just in our work lives, but so much else that, William articulated so nicely. There's a word that keeps popping into my mind, but I don't want to be recorded saying it to describe this whole, last year. But it's been a lot for a lot of people, and to try to just, stop and give each other a little bit more grace, I think is so important. Any other thoughts or questions, or anyone want to share? We have a few more minutes.
All right. Oh, I think we have another question. Oh, we have a comment
Mhm.
from Monica. I agree, it's been harder for me to be on time for some reason.
Yeah. And I wonder if some of that is like, not necessarily for you, Monica, but for like myself, like, am I just dreading this next thing? Is it like, oh, I just need to like not sign in until the very last minute because, now I'm going to be back on the computer, and there's just so much fatigue associated with that. Yeah.
And I think I've learned a lot about how to really take a break, especially from this virtual world. I have times that I just will get up from the computer, and I may get a text, I may get a phone call during that time, but that's my time to just be outside, breathe some fresh air, walk around, just taking that break during the day. And that's what I said, that, we have to be careful about trying to make people be on for the entire 8 hours of the day. Because if they were in the workplace, they would be in their, they would be doing their jobs, and then they would actually take a break.
Yeah, that's so true. My office, the IACUC office, is about a 15-minute walk to campus. And so if we had meetings, we would have that time to walk up to campus, or, you take a break and you go down the street and get lunch, or, you stop and run into a colleague in the hall and you chat for a few minutes. And, we don't have those little breaks anymore. So like Monica wrote, it's so much harder to disengage because we feel like we're just going. Okay, this meeting ended. Now I'm in the next one. Now I'm in the next one. And there's just so much work to do, but yeah.
And then what happens at the end of that is that, people had their own personal lives. And so now those personal interactions that you would normally be doing, especially with family time, well, now those family times are at Zoom too. So you've Zoomed all day long at work, and then you want to engage, with your aunt who lives in Texas, who you can't go and see. So now you have to engage virtually with her, and other family members. And so, you're 24-hour Zooms.
Yeah.
And we used to think that the whole FaceTime on the iPhone was the greatest thing since sliced bread. It was like, oh, I get to see everything and everybody. It's like, ooh.
Yeah, now it's like, stop looking at me.
Yes.
Or does my hair look okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we have
There's
another
a question
question.
here about wellness, and I'll just kind of follow up with what my co-panelist said. Personal wellness is absolutely critical to effective communication, because if we aren't well, then we take that out on the people that we interact with on a daily basis, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's at home. Hurt people, and we typically are, if we don't take the steps that we need to be well, then we are short, we are impatient. And so I have no qualms about sharing. In the pandemic, or during the pandemic, I sought out the professional assistance of a therapist. And it was just very helpful for me to kind of navigate everything that I was experiencing and find the tools to be successful. So I would encourage individuals to do that, whether it's through your institution, the employee assistance program, or whether it's a personal provider. But do those things, and certainly I think institutions and organizations also need to look at how can we promote wellness, whether it is, and I don't want to sound trivial here, but providing opportunities for early release, providing food opportunities, or having a conversation. How are you doing today? What can I do to help you achieve our shared goals or your shared goals? How are your kids? How is your dog? Those kinds of conversations go a long way in establishing relationships and building trust.
Well said.
Yeah, agreed.
I want to go back to the question to see if it was addressed.
I think so. I think so.
Mhm.
So are there any other comments from the attendees this afternoon? On behalf of this team and the B01 presentation, I want to thank my panelists, my working partners. I think we did a great job here this evening. I think that we brought out some things that happened at our home institutions and how we were able to navigate that. I want to thank all the people who have attended. And I hope you can take some of the things that we've talked about here. And even though we're like a whole year or more into this pandemic, I think the information and the things that I have learned throughout this time will help me carry on and actually be a better communicator at my facility with those that I have to be engaged with.
Agreed.
So thank you very much. We appreciate your time and have a great rest of your afternoon. Good night. Bye.
Thank you to you guys for speaking. And everybody, the evaluation will be sent to you within 24 to 48 hours. And the session recordings will be available as well.
Great. Thank you.